Thus saith the Lord, stand ye in the ways, and see, and ask for the old paths, where is the good way, and walk therein, and ye shall find rest for your soul. You are now listening to the Old Paths Podcast, hosted by Brother Reggie Paige.
Peace and blessings, everyone, and welcome back to the Old Paths Podcast, aka the OP Podcast. And again, yes, OP stands for overpowered, and that's not because I am overpowered, but it is He, the Most High God, who is overpowered in the good and only sense. Thank you for joining me again. I am your host, Brother Reggie Paige, and this is episode 3. And today's topic is going to be a continuation of the character building book of Booker T. Washington. This chapter is called Two Sides of Life. And without further ado, let's just jump right into it. And I quote, "There are quite a number of divisions into which life can be divided, but for the purposes of this evening, I am going to speak of two, the bright side of life and the dark side. In thought, in talk, in action, I think you will find that you can separate life into these two divisions, the dark side and the bright side, the discouraging side and the encouraging side. You will find, too, that there are two classes of people, just as there are two divisions of the subject. There is one class that is schooling itself and constantly training itself to look upon the dark side of life, and there is another class made up of people who are consciously or unconsciously constantly training themselves to look upon the bright side of life." So Booker T. Washington begins this speech talking about how people are divided into two classes, one that looks upon the dark side of life, as he states, and the other, the bright side of life. I can't lie that when I first read this, I automatically thought about Star Wars and how the universe is divided by people who divulge into the dark side or the light side of the Force. But this specific saying that Booker T. Washington is making is true to an extent, because as gray this world can be, people do tend to choose rather to serve to be bright and good or strive to be dark or evil. The simplest example I can think of is you have a man who is striving to serve the Most High and learn all his ways, while you have a man who strives to be wicked and bring others to conform to their wicked philosophy, such as up is down, down is up, lust is love, and love is lust. And, I know a lot of people who are atheists, right? Even though they do have a belief, whether it's just of themselves or money or whatever God they choose to worship. But these atheists that I have come across, they tend to always try to bring people down to their misery, to their miserable philosophy. But Booker T. Washington, back to him, he further explains, and I quote, "Now it is not wise to go too far in either direction. The person who schools himself to see the dark side of life is likely to make a mistake. And the person who schools himself to look only upon the bright side of life, forgetting all else, also is apt to make a mistake. Notwithstanding this, I think I am right in saying that the persons who accomplish the most in this world, those to whom, on account of their helpfulness, the world looks most for service, those who are most useful in every way, are those who are constantly seeing and appreciating the bright side as well as the dark side." In the book of Proverbs, chapter 11, in the first verse, it states this: "A false balance is abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight." So concerning this, you must have a balance of things you give your study into. Let's continue on with Booker T. Washington in his book. "You will sometimes find two persons who get up in the morning, perhaps a morning that is overcast with shadows, a damp, wet, raining, uninviting morning, and one of these persons will speak of the morning as being gloomy, will speak of the mud puddles about the house, of the rain, and of all of the disagreeable features. The second person, the one who has schooled himself to see the brighter side of life, the beautiful things in life, will speak of the beauties that are in the raindrops and the freshness of the newly bathed flowers, shrubs, and trees. Notwithstanding the gloomy and generally disconsolate appearance of things, he will find something attractive in the scenes out of the doors, and will discover something in the gloomy morning that will cheer him. Suppose that you see these same two persons eat their breakfast. Perhaps they will find out that the rolls are bad, but that the coffee is excellent. If the rolls are poor, it is a great deal better in such a case to get into a habit that you will find pays from every standpoint, of being able to forget how unpalatable they are, and to let your thoughts dwell upon the good and satisfactory coffee. Call the attention of your near neighbor at the table to the excellence of the coffee. What is the result of that kind of schooling? You will grow up to be an individual whom people will like to see coming near them, an individual to whom people will go for encouragement when the hours are dark and when everything seems to be discouraging. In just the same way, when you go into the classrooms to recite your lessons, do not dwell upon any mistakes that you may think you see the teacher make, or upon any weakness in the presentation of the lesson. All teachers make mistakes sometimes, and you may depend upon it that it is an excellent teacher and a person of fine character who, when he or she has made a mistake, says frankly and plainly, "I have made a mistake," or "I don't know." It takes a very good and very bright teacher to say, "I don't know." No teacher knows everything about every subject. A good teacher will say frankly and clearly, "I don't know. I cannot answer that question." The main point he is making in this statement thus far, though the world is imperfect, you don't have to always dwell or mourn or call out on the imperfections of life. It's like being at a restaurant with a friend who complains about the smallest mistakes in the service, like the server may have forgotten a drink. Ultimately, those type of people are not who you want to be around during your dark seasons, because they focus purely on the darker matters of life. They can't fathom that people make mistakes, and they too have made mistakes as well. But you know what that is called? That's called pride. Think about the story of Job. Job's friends were viewed as miserable comforters to Job when Job had lost all his wealth, his children, his job, and even his beauty. Job's friends took time to talk about how if a man sins, he deserves to be punished. In certain chapters, they talk about the wicked man, and ultimately, because Job did not succumb to their negative speeches, they got mad and walked away. When you study Job's friends in the book of Job, you will find the perfect example of someone or people who school themselves mostly on the darker side of life. Now, on the contrary, it is also bad to school yourself solely on the good in life. That is why a false balance is an abomination, because when you are searching for truth, the truth will indeed make, not set you free, but make you free. But the truth sometimes will hurt at the same time. Freedom is good, but the sword divides. If you are wise and are striving to be a good man, you understand that you are not perfect and will sin or make mistakes. That is humility. That's being humble. And people will rather be around and even learn from those who are humble and have a balance of understanding both sides of life. And when you are that type of person who looks at their own imperfections, but instead of dwelling on those imperfections and having a self-pity party, you actually try to better yourself and correct those mistakes. However, all of that takes being sober-minded and humble. Booker T. Washington continues. Let me tell you right here, too, that when you go out from here to become teachers yourselves, as a large proportion of you will go, whenever you get to the point where a student asks you a question which you are not able to answer, or asks you something about the subject on which you are not well informed, you will find it better to say frankly and honestly, "I am unable to answer your question." Your students will respect you a great deal more for your frankness and honesty. Education is not what a person is able to hold in his head, so much as it is what a person is able to find. I believe it was Daniel Webster who said that the truly educated man was not the one who had all the knowledge in his head, but the one who knew where to look for information upon any subject upon which at any time he might want information. Each individual who wishes to succeed must get the kind of discipline. He must get such training that he will know where to go and get facts rather than try to train himself to hold all the facts in his head. And, this is a true statement. If you think you will know everything, you're just fooling yourself, right? And you pretty much are a fool. And again, that is pride. That's why in 1 Corinthians, the first verse of the 8th chapter states, now as touching things offered unto idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffeth up, but charity edifieth. But again, those who are wise understand that they do not know everything and most likely will never know anything. Or everything, excuse me. But it is humbling and respectful to just admit you don't know something. However, wise people know how to find knowledge. If they don't know something, they won't leave it at that. If a wise man does not know something, he or she will seek for it. And they tend to know where to look as well. And we see this principle in Proverbs, the 18th chapter of the 15th verse. The heart of the prudent getteth knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeketh knowledge. I want you to go out from this institution so trained and so developed that you will be constantly looking for the bright, encouraging, and beautiful things in life. It is the weak individual, as a rule, who is constantly calling attention to the other side, to the dark and discouraging things of life. When you go into the classrooms, I repeat, try to forget and overlook any weak points that you may think you see. Remember and dwell upon the consideration that has been given to the lesson, the faithfulness with which it was prepared, and the earnestness with which it is presented. Try to recall and to remember every good thing and every encouraging thing which has come under your observation, whether it has been in the classroom or in the shop or in the field. No matter where you are, seize hold on the encouraging things with which you come in contact. In connection with the personality of their teachers, it is very unfortunate for students to form a habit of continually finding fault or criticizing, of seeing nothing but what the student may think are weak points. Try to get into a frame of mind where you will be constantly seeing and calling attention to the strong and beautiful things which you observe in the life and work of your teachers. Grow into the habit of talking about the bright side of life. When you meet a fellow student, a teacher, or anybody, or when you write letters home, get into the habit of calling attention to the bright things of life that you have seen, the things that are beautiful, the things that are charming. Just in proportion as you do this, you will find that you will not only influence yourself in the right direction, but that you will also influence others that way. It is a very bad habit to get into, that of being continually moody and discouraged, and of making the atmosphere uncomfortable for everybody who comes within 10 feet of you. There are some people who are so constantly looking on the dark side of life that they cannot see anything but that side. Everything that comes from their mouths is unpleasant about this thing and that thing, and they make the whole atmosphere around them unpleasant for themselves and for everybody with whom they come in contact. Such persons are surely undesirable. Why? I have seen people coming up the road who cause me to feel like wanting to cross over on the other side of the way so as not to meet them. I didn't want to hear their tales of misery and woe. I had heard those tales so many times that I didn't want to get into the atmosphere of the people who told them. Everything Booker T. Washington is saying is self-explanatory. But understand this. He's not saying to never talk about misery and your personal woes or about the bad side of life. For there is a time where you may discuss those things in honesty and in truth. Again, he is talking about the people who are just grumpy all the time and bitter all the time. And just as someone who has a good spirit has the light to influence and uplift others to be also in good spirits and help them see the good side of life, even if they are not in a good mood themselves or they are dwelling on the bad sides of life themselves. The person who is constantly bitter and in bad spirits can influence others to be like them as well. Misery loves company. It's a proverb we use in our society. And in the Bible, it says the root of bitterness defileth many, right? So it's very contagious. Booker T. Washington even touches up on this aspect of the influence of those who look and dwell on the bad side of life and how it does defile many. And I quote, "It is very often easy to influence others in the wrong direction and to grow into such a moody, fault-finding disposition that one not only is miserable and unhappy himself, but makes everyone with whom he comes in contact miserable and unhappy. The persons who live constantly in a fault-finding atmosphere, who see only the dark side of life, become negative characters. They are the people who never go forward. They never suggest a line of activity. They live simply on the negative side of life. Now, as students, you cannot afford to grow in that way. We want to send each one of you out from here not as a negative force, but as a strong, positive, helpful force in this world. You will not accomplish the task which we expect of you if you go with a moody, discouraged, fault-finding disposition." And I like this part, so if you want to underline it, if you're reading along, he says this: "To do the most that lies in you, you must go with a heart and head full of hope and faith in the world, believing that there is work for you to do. Believing that you are the person to accomplish that work and the one who is going to accomplish it. In 9 cases out of 10, the person who cultivates the habit of looking on the dark side of life is the little person, the miserable person, the one who is weak in mind, heart, and purpose. On the other hand, the person who cultivates the habit of looking on the bright side of life and who calls attention to the beautiful and encouraging things in life is, in 9 cases out of 10, the strong individual, the one to whom the world goes for intelligent advice and support. I am trying to get you to see as students the best things in life. Do not be satisfied with second-hand or third-hand things in life. Do not be satisfied until you have put yourselves into that atmosphere where you can seize and hold on to the very highest and most beautiful things that can be got out of life." And as he ends here, he said something, says some great things that I will juxtapose with the scriptures. First, in the book of Hebrews, chapter 12, verse 15, it states this: "Looking diligently, lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled." Bitter people tend to make other people bitter. It doesn't take a man with a philosopher's stone to know that this world is fallen and full of suffering and pain. But if that is all you dwell on, and then you try to bring others into your misery, then you only show how weak, heartless, and miserable you are. And how can you be a leader who leads to make the world less of pain when you are indeed contributing to why this world is fallen? When you look on the beauty of life, the things that are true, then you show strength. Going back to the book of Job, Job was in a bad place and a bad state of mind where he even cursed his own day, right? He wished that he was either dead or never born. The only one who truly encouraged him was Elihu. At times his friends did, but it was just sandwiched amongst just so much bad things that they said. But the Most High, literally, God, was the only one that brought Job to see the beauty of life. And I believe you can find that in the 38th through the last chapter of Job, right? Job chapter 38 through 42. It shows Job, God shows Job the beauty of life that he, talk about the Most High, he created. And Job was made better after that because he looked at and dwelt on the brighter side of life. He dwelt on God's creation and God's power. And as Christians, that brighter side of life is the godly side of life, for the world is dark, but Christ is the light of the world. And I'll end with this scripture in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8 through 9. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good rapport, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. Those things which ye have both learned, and received, and heard, and seen in me, do, and the God of peace shall be with you. And hey, that's just the low-down gospel truth. Again, thank you for watching. And we'll continue next time with the next chapter of the character building series, God willing. But if you enjoyed this episode, please do like, comment, and subscribe, and share. Share the knowledge. Share the knowledge with your colleagues, co-workers, family, and friends. And remember, the truth shall make you free. May the God of peace, all knowledge, have mercy and grace upon you all. Peace.